I just finished up with Anki, and there's something kind of completely different that I want to do. Someone recently mentioned to me about a Canadian citizenship test. Pretty much the test that citizens take to become permanent residents. And I didn't really know much about this, and it's actually got some really interesting information. In Canada, we have an election coming up in October, and I don't think a lot of people actually know the information that's in this. So I wanted to go over it, even if just for myself, and see how much I actually know about my own country here. So here it is. Citizenship and Immigration Canada. Discover Canada, the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. So we have an oath here. The oath of citizenship. I swear or affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors, and that I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada and fulfill my duties as a Canadian citizen. So what are those? We'll find it. In Canada, we profess our loyalty to a person who represents all Canadians and not to a document such as a constitution, a banner such as a flag, or a geopolitical entity such as a country. In our constitutional monarchy, these elements are encompassed by the sovereign, queen or king. It is a remarkably simple yet powerful principle. Canada is personified by the sovereign, just as the sovereign is personified by Canada. Third-party citizenship study guides, tests, and questions. The official study guide for the citizenship test is Discover Canada, the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. Avail from the citizenship and no cost if you applied. Primary resource should be the official study guide. If you use anything else, so that's for people actually taking the test. Message to our readers. Welcome. It took courage to move to a new country. Your decision to apply for citizenship is another big step. You're becoming part of a great tradition that was built by generations of pioneers before you. Once you have met all legal requirements, we hope to welcome you as a new citizen with all the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. So, I guess this is still on a message to our readers. Canada has welcomed generations of newcomers to our shores to help us build a free, law-abiding, and prosperous society. For 400 years, settlers and immigrants have contributed to the diversity and richness of our country, which is built on a proud history and a strong identity. Canada is a constitutional monarchy, a parliamentary democracy, and a federal state. I should look all those words up, make sure I fully understand them. That's something I'll do later. Canadians are bound together by a shared commitment to the rule of law and to the institutions of parliamentary government. Canadians take pride in their identity and have made sacrifices to defend their way of life. By coming to Canada and taking this important step towards citizenship, you're helping to write the continuing story of Canada. Immigrants between the ages of 18 and 54 must have adequate knowledge of English or French in order to become Canadian citizens. You must also learn about voting procedures, Canada's history, symbols, democratic institutions, geography, and the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. Canadian citizens enjoy many rights, but Canadians also have responsibility. They must obey Canada's laws and respect the rights and freedoms of others. This guide will help you prepare to become a Canadian citizen. Good luck. For information about citizenship and Immigration Canada, visit our website. That's not important for me. Contents. What's in this? Applying for citizenship, rights, who we are, history, Canada, governing, elections, symbols, economy, regions, study questions. Let's go right to that, actually. I'm curious. What do we got? 30. Page 52. Let's trust. What are the response? Oh, no. It's got the answers. That's fucking lame. Alright. Let's read. Let's learn about Canada. How to use this booklet to prepare a citizenship test. This booklet will help you prepare for the citizenship test. You should study this guide, ask a friend or family member to help you practice answering the questions about Canada, call the local school or board. The citizenship is usually a written test, but it could be an interview. You'll be tested on two basic requirements for citizenship: knowledge of Canada and the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. And 2, adequate knowledge of English or French. Adult applicants of 55 years of age and over do not need to write this citizenship test. The citizenship regulations provide information on how your ability to meet the knowledge of Canada requirement is determined. Information about this requirement can be found on page 64 of the study guide. All the citizenship tests questions are based on the subject areas noted in the citizenship regulations, and all required information is provided in this study guide. Okay. Okay. After the test. After pass the test and meet all the requirements, you receive a notice to appear to take the oath of citizenship. This document tells you the date, time, and place of your citizenship ceremony. Take the oath of citizenship, sign the oath form, receive your Canadian citizenship certificate. If you do not pass the test, you will receive a notification indicating all the next steps. You are encouraged to bring your family and friends to celebrate this occasion. Okay, so rights and responsibilities of citizenship. Canadian citizens have rights and responsibilities. These come to us from our history, are secured by Canadian law, and reflect our shared traditions, identity, and values. Canadian law has several sources, including laws passed by Parliament and provincial legislatures. English common law, the Civil Code of France, and the unwritten constitution that we have inherited from Great Britain. Civil Code of France, that's interesting. English common law. Together, these secure for Canadians an 800-year-old tradition of ordered liberty, which dates back to the signing of the Magna Carta in 1215 in England, also known as the Great Charter of Freedoms, including freedom of conscience and religion, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of speech and of the press, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association. Habeas corpus, the right to challenge unlawful detention by the state, comes from the English common law. Habeas corpus, the right to challenge unlawful detention. Interesting. The Constitution of Canada was amended in 1982 to entrench the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That's not even that long ago. Which begins with the words, "Whereas Canada is founded upon the principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law," this phrase underlines the importance of religious traditions in Canadian society and the dignity and worth of the human person. The Charter attempts to summarize fundamental freedoms while also setting out additional rights. The most important of these include mobility rights. Canadians can live and work anywhere they choose in Canada, enter and leave the country freely, and apply for a passport. Aboriginal people's rights. The rights guaranteed in the Charter will not adversely affect any treaty or other rights or freedoms of Aboriginal peoples. Official language rights and minority language educational rights. French and English have equal status in Parliament and throughout the government. Multiculturalism. A fundamental characteristic of Canadian heritage and identity. Canadians celebrate the gift of one another's presence and work hard to respect pluralism and live in harmony. Wow, she's young there. That's great. The equality of men and women. Women and men. In Canada, men and women are equal under the law. Canada's openness and generosity do not extend to barbaric cultural practices that tolerate spousal abuse, honor killings, female genital mutilation, forced marriages, or other gender-based violence. Those guilty of these crimes are severely punished under Canada's criminal laws. Citizenship responsibilities. What are my responsibilities? In Canada, rights come with responsibilities. These include obeying the law. One of Canada's founding principles is the rule of law. Individuals and governments are regulated by laws and not by arbitrary actions. No person or group is above the law. Taking responsibility for oneself and one's family. Getting a job, taking care of one's family, and working hard in keeping with one's ability are important Canadian values. Work contributes to personal dignity and self-respect and to Canada's prosperity. Serving on a jury. When called to do so, you are legally required to serve. Serving on a jury is a privilege that makes the justice system work, as it depends on the impartial juries made up of citizens. Voting in elections. The right to vote comes from the responsibility to vote in the federal, provincial, or territorial and local elections. Helping others in the community. Millions of volunteers freely donate their time to help others without pay. Helping in need. assisting at your child's school, volunteering at a food bank or other charity, or encouraging newcomers to integrate. Volunteering is an excellent way to gain useful skills and develop friends and contacts. Protecting and enjoying our heritage and environment. Every citizen has a role to play in avoiding waste and pollution while protecting Canada's natural, cultural, architectural heritage for future generations. Defending Canada. There is no compulsory military service in Canada. However, serving in the regular Canadian Forces, Navy, Army, and Air Force is a noble way to contribute to Canada. An excellent career choice. You can serve in your local part-time Navy, militia, and Air Reserves to gain valuable experience, skills, and contacts. Young people can learn discipline, responsibility, and skills by getting involved in the cadets. You may also serve in the Coast Guard or emergency services in your community, such as police force, fire department. By helping to protect your community, you follow the footsteps of Canadians before you who made sacrifices in the service of our country. Who we are? Who are Canadians? From top to bottom. Métis from Alberta, Cree answer. Left to right, Inuit, children, and Iqaluit. None of it became a province, but I think that was in grade 3 or 4. Before that, it was just Northwest Territories. Bill Reid. I've heard of that guy, actually. Don't know about that. The ancestors of Aboriginal peoples. Canada is known around the world as a strong and free country. Canadians are proud of their unique identity. We have inherited the oldest continuous constitutional tradition in the world. We are the only constitutional monarchy in North America. Our institutions uphold a commitment to peace, order, and good government. A key phrase in Canada's original constitutional document in 1867. The British North America Act. A belief in ordered liberty, enterprise, hard work, and fair play has enabled Canadians to build a prosperous society in a rugged environment from our Atlantic shores to the Pacific Ocean and to the Arctic Circle. So much so that poets and songwriters have hailed Canada as the Great Dominion. To understand what it means to be Canadian, it is important to know about our 3 founding peoples: Aboriginal, British, and French. French and British. Aboriginal peoples. The ancestors of Aboriginal peoples are believed to have migrated from Asia many thousands of years ago. They were well established here long before explorers from Europe first came to North America. Diverse, vibrant First Nations cultures were rooted in religious beliefs about their relationship to the Creator, the natural environment, and each other. Aboriginal treaty rights are in the Canadian Constitution. Territorial rights were first guaranteed through the Royal Proclamation of 1763 by King George III and established the basis for negotiating treaties with the newcomers. Treaties were not always fully respected. From the 1800s until the 1980s, the federal government placed many Aboriginal children in residential schools to educate and assimilate them into mainstream Canadian culture. The schools were properly funded and inflicted hardship on the students. Some were physically abused. Aboriginal languages and cultural practices were mostly prohibited. In 2008, Ottawa formally apologized to the former students. In today's Canada, Aboriginal peoples enjoy renewed pride and confidence and have made significant achievements in agriculture, the environment, business, and the arts. Today, the term Aboriginal peoples refers to 3 distinct groups. Indian refers to all Aboriginal people who are not Inuit or Métis. In the 1970s, the term First Nations began to be used. Today, about half of First Nation people live on the reserve land or in 600 communities, while other half live off-reserve, mainly in urban centers. Union diversity. John Buchan, the first Baron Tweedsmuir, was a popular Governor-General of Canada in 1935-40. Immigrant groups, he said, should retain their individuality and each make its contribution to the national character. Each could learn from the other, and while they cherish their own special loyalties and traditions, they cherish not less that new loyalty and tradition which springs from their union. The 15th Governor-General is shown here in blood headdress. Crazy. The Inuit, which means the people, in the Inuktitut language, live in small, scattered communities across the Arctic. Their knowledge of the land, sea, and wildlife enabled them to adapt to one of the harshest environments on Earth. The Métis are a distinct people of mixed Aboriginal and European ancestry, the majority of whom live in the prairie provinces. They come from both French and English-speaking backgrounds and speak their own dialect. The chief. About 65% of Aboriginal people are First Nations, while 30% are Métis and 4% Inuit. English and French. Canadian society streams largely from the English-speaking and French-speaking Christian civilizations that were brought here from Europe by settlers. English and French define the reality of day-to-day life for most people in their countries and are the country's official languages. The federal government is required by law to provide services throughout Canada in English and French. Today, there are 18 million Anglophones, people who speak English as a first language, and 7 million Francophones, people who speak French as their first language. While the majority of Francophones live in the province of Quebec, 1 million Francophones live in Ontario, New Brunswick, and Manitoba, with smaller presence than other provinces. New Brunswick is the only official bilingual province. That's really interesting. New Brunswick's really small. The Acadians are the descendants of French colonists who began settling in what are now the Maritime provinces in 1604. Between 755 and 1763, the war between Britain and France, more than two-thirds of the Acadians were deported from their homeland. Despite this ordeal known as the Great Upheaval, the Acadians survived and maintained their unique identity. Today, Acadian culture is flourishing and is a lively part of French-speaking Canada. Quebecers are the people of Quebec. The vast majority are French-speaking, most are descendants of 8,500 French settlers from the 1600s and 1700s and maintain their unique identity, culture, and language. The House of Commons recognized in 2006 that the Quebecois form a nation within a united Canada. 1 million Anglo-Quebecers have a heritage of 250 years and form a vibrant part of the Quebec fabric. Becoming Canadian. Some Canadians immigrate from places where they've experienced warfare or conflict. Such experiences do not justify bringing to Canada violent, extreme, or hateful prejudices. In becoming Canadian, newcomers are expected to embrace democratic principles such as rule of law. I wonder what actually enforces that. That seems like a really hard thing to enforce. The basic way of life. And people can kind of believe whatever they want. I don't know how you police that. Maybe they have a way. I don't know. The basic way of life in English-speaking areas was established by hundreds and thousands of English, Welsh, Scottish, and Irish settlers. Soldiers and migrants from the 1600s to the 20th century. Generations of pioneers and builders of British origins, as well as other groups, invested and endured hardship in laying the foundations of our country. This helps explain why the Anglophones, English speakers, are generally referred to as English Canadians. I've never heard English Canadian in my life. Diversity in Canada. The majority of Canadians were born in this country, and this has been true since the 1800s. However, Canada is often referred as a land of immigrants because over the past 200 years, millions of newcomers have helped to build and defend our way of life. Many ethnic and religious groups live and work in peace around us. Proud Canadians, the largest group are English, French, Scottish, Irish, German, Italian, Chinese, Aboriginal, Ukrainian, and Dutch, South Asian, and Scandinavian. Since the 1970s, most immigrants have come from Asian countries. Non-official languages are widely spoken in Canadian homes. Chinese language is the second most spoken at home after English, and two of Canada's biggest cities, Vancouver and Toronto. In Vancouver, 30% of the population speak Chinese languages at home. In Toronto, the number is 7%. The great majority of Canadians identify as Christians. The largest religious affiliation is Catholic, followed by various Protestant churches. The number of Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, and members of other religions, as well as people who state no religion, are also growing. In Canada, the state has traditionally partnered with faith communities to promote social welfare, harmony, and mutual respect, to provide schools and health care, to resettle refugees, and to uphold religious freedom, religious expression, and freedom of conscience. Canada's diversity includes gay and lesbian Canadians who enjoy the full protection of and equal treatment under law, including access to civil marriage. Together, these diverse groups share a common Canadian identity and make up today's multicultural society. Nova Scotia is a descendant of black loyalists, escaped slaves, and freed men and women of African origin who in the 1780s fled to Canada from America, where slavery remained until 1863. Interesting. It's Underground Railroad stuff, I think. How long is the history? Because that's actually really interesting. I could start reading that, I guess. I'm pretty decent amount through this thing. So, Canada's history. Aboriginal peoples. When Europeans explored Canada, they found all regions occupied by native peoples they called Indians, because the first explorers thought they had reached the East Indies. The native people lived off the land, some by hunting and gathering, others by raising crops. The Huron-Wendat of the Great Lakes region, like the Iroquois, were farmers and hunters. The Cree and Den of the Northwest were hunter-gatherers. The Sioux were nomadic, following the bison herd. The Inuit lived off the Arctic wildlife. West Coast natives preserved fish by drying and smoking. Warfare was common among Aboriginal peoples as they competed for land, resources, and prestige. The arrival of European traders, missionaries, soldiers, and colonists changed the native way of life forever. Large numbers of Aboriginals died of European diseases which they had lacked immunity. However, Aboriginals and Europeans formed strong economic, religious, and military bonds in the first 200 years of coexistence, which laid the foundations of Canada. John Cabot, an Italian immigrant to England, was the first to map Canada's Atlantic shore, setting foot on Newfoundland or Cape Breton Island in 1497 and claiming the Newfoundland for England. English settlement did not begin until 1610. Jacques Cartier was the first European explorer to explore the St. Lawrence River and to set eyes on present-day Quebec City and Montreal. I learned about all this at school, but it's all kind of coming back. The Vikings from Iceland, who colonized Greenland 1,000 years ago, reached Labrador and the island of Newfoundland. The remains of their settlement, Lanzomedal pronunciation, are a World Heritage Site. European exploration began in earnest in 1497 with the expedition of John Cabot, who was the first to draw a map of Canada's east coast, exploring a river named Canada. Between 1534 and 1542, Jacques Cartier made 3 voyages across the Atlantic, claiming the land for King Francis I of France. Cartier heard 2 captured guides speak Iroquoian word Kanata, meaning village. By the 1550s, the name of Canada began appearing on maps. Royal New France. In 1604, the first European settlement north of Florida was established by French explorers, Pierre de Monts and Samuel de Champlain, first on St. Croix in present-day Maine, then at Port Royal in Acadia, present-day Nova Scotia. In 1608, Champlain built a fortress at what is now Quebec City. The colonists struggled against a harsh climate. Champlain allied the colony with the Algonquin, Montagnais, and Huron, historic enemies of the Iroquois. A confederation of 5, later 6 First Nations who battled with the French settlements for a century. The French and Iroquois made peace in 1701. The French and Aboriginal people collaborated in the vast fur trade economy. Driven by the demand for beaver pelts in Europe, outstanding leaders like John Talon, Bishop Laval, and Count Frontenac built a French empire in North America that reached from Hudson Bay to the Gulf of Mexico. That's huge. Struggle for a continent. In 1670, King Charles II of England granted the Hudson Bay Company exclusive trading rights over the watershed draining into Hudson Bay. For the next 100 years, the company competed with Montreal-based traders. The skilled and courageous men who traveled by canoe were called voyageurs and coureurs de bois, and formed strong alliances with First Nations. English colonies along the Atlantic seaboard, dating from the early 1600s, eventually became richer and more populous than New France. In the 1700s, France and Great Britain battled for control of North America. In 1759, the British defeated the French in the Battle of the Plains of Abraham at Quebec City, marking the end of France's empire in America. The commanders of both armies, Brigadier James Wolfe and Marquis de Montcalm, were killed, leading their troops in battle. That battle was a really big deal. It's really interesting if you ever read more about it. Quebec's built on this it's like a cliff. It's very high above the river, and the British were able to sneak up that cliff in the night. And instead of attacking the fortress head on, they were able to fight on a field on top of the cliff outside the city, which the French never expected. And they were even able to bring, I think, 2 cannons up the cliff. And I've been to Quebec City, and it's really steep. To have done what they did was pretty incredible. It's worth looking into more. I'll probably finish this page. The province of Quebec. Following the war, Great Britain renamed the colony the Province of Quebec. The French-speaking Catholic people known as habitants of, or Canadians, strove to preserve their way of life in the English-speaking Protestant-ruled British Empire, a tradition of accommodation. To better govern the French Roman Catholic majority, the British Parliament passed the Quebec Act of 1774. One of the constitutional foundations of Canada, the Quebec Act accommodated the principles of British institutions to the reality of the province. It allowed religious freedom for Catholics and permitted them to hold public office, a practice not then allowed in Britain. The Quebec Act restored French civil law while maintaining British criminal law. United Empire Loyalists. In 1776, 13 British colonies to the south of Quebec declared independence and formed the United States. North America was again divided by war. More than 40,000 people loyal to the crown, called Loyalists, fled the oppression of the American Revolution to settle in Nova Scotia and Quebec. Joseph Brant led thousands of Loyalist Mohawk Indians into Canada. Loyalists came from Dutch, German, British, and Scandinavian, Aboriginal, and other origins, and from Presbyterian, Anglican, Baptist, Methodist, Jewish, Quaker, and Catholic religious backgrounds. About 3,000 black loyalist freedmen and slaves came north seeking a better life. In turn, in 1792, some black Nova Scotians were given poor land, moved to establish a free town, Sierra Leone. New British colony for free. Interesting. I didn't know that's where that came from. I just want to know when we lost slavery. (1807). 1833. We abolished slavery throughout the empire. Prohibited in 1807. Buying and selling. Interesting. Count Frontenac refused to surrender Quebec to the English in 1690, saying, "My only reply will be from the mouths of my cannons." So great hero of France, winning many victories over the English, from James Bay in the north to Navy in the Caribbean, late 17th and early 18th centuries. Carleton, Dorchester as governor of Quebec, defended the rights of Canadians, defeated an American military invasion in Quebec in 1775, and supervised the Loyalist migration to Nova Scotia and Quebec in 1782 and 83. Alright, so that was overall pretty interesting. About a quarter of the way through, and I'll pick this up probably later someday in a later stream. I want to finish reading the whole thing, and I kind of want to get in more. I want to learn more about the Canadian legal system, and I figure sharing it's probably the best way to do it, because at least then I'm teaching somebody else. And like I mentioned before, we have an election coming up in October, and there's a lot of information about Canada I think people don't know about. And I think this is probably not the best means because no one's really watching. But it helps me, and then I can explain it to others. So I'll probably just read through things like the Constitution. I'll probably start there. Read things like the Privacy Act, different acts of rights and freedoms. Learn as much as I can. So yeah, that's the end for now.